Hello and welcome to 3.4 Notes. Today we're going to go over slope, okay, the concept of slope. Slope is designated with the letter m, so slope equals m, and the definition of slope is that it is the rise over the run of a straight line, okay, rise over run of a straight line. And the rise is the change in y, and the run would be the change in x. And so you get that your equation for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so why don't you write that down, get caught up, and remember you can pause this presentation or fast forward or rewind anytime you'd like. You're in total control of this presentation, so you can go at your own pace. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to continue. So we have a definition of slope. Slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's investigate visually, pictorially, what's going on here. So we have an x and y coordinate plane, and we have this line here. So we're going to be talking about the slope of this line. So what you do when you want to find the slope of a line is you pick 2 points. They can be any 2 points on the line. So I have these 2 points here. This point will be called point 1. So the coordinate is going to be, the coordinate of that point is going to be x1 comma y1, and then this point is point 2, and I'm going to call that then the coordinate x2 comma y2. Okay, so if you look at this way, to get from this point to, excuse me, let me start again, to get from this point to this point, what you're doing basically is you're going up and over. So you have the rise, which is y2 minus y1, over the run, which is x2 minus x1. So to just bring that concept home a little bit more, the concept of rise over run, let me draw another coordinate plane. Remember, x is always horizontal, y is always vertical. And let's say if I have this line, and let me just kind of make up points here. Let's say if this first point is 2, 3, and this second point is, say, I don't know, 7, 9 or something like that. Then remember, to get from this point, to this point, I go rise over run, so I go up, that's my rise, and that's my run. To find my rise, I would go 9 minus 3, which is 6, and then my run would be 7 minus 2, which would be 5. Okay? And then also, you can, remember, you can go from this point down to this point. So if I did that, my rise would be a negative, right? I'm going down. So my rise would be negative 6, and my run would be negative 5. So if I went from here to here, that's rise over run of 6 over 5. Or if I went from this point to this point, this down and then to the left, I would have negative 6 over negative 5. But either way, those two values equal each other, right? Because 6 over 5 equals negative 6 over negative 5, right? So that's, remember, rise over run is your slope, and the rise can be up or down, and your run can be left or right. Okay? Alright, so moving right along. You also need to know that if you're going from left to right, if your slope goes up, it's a positive slope. So again, as you go left to right, if it looks like this, it's a positive slope. And if you're going from left to right, again, and it goes down, then it's a negative slope. Or again, if you're going from left to right, and it looks like this, it is a negative slope. Okay? And then we have this horizontal line. What is the slope of a horizontal line? Well, the slope of a horizontal line is 0. Let's investigate that really quickly. Remember, the definition of slope is rise over run, and in a horizontal line, the rise is 0, right? There is no rise in a horizontal line. So it's 0 over whatever the run is, which is 0. Okay? Okay, and I just copied this down onto the next frame for your convenience, so there's no need for you to copy this down twice. But what would be the slope of a vertical line? Well, the slope of a vertical line is undefined. It has no slope. So a vertical line has no slope. And please don't confuse that with a value of 0. A horizontal line has a slope of 0, but a vertical line has no slope. Okay? And there's a difference between 0 and no slope, right? 0 is a value. 0 is a number. It exists. 0 means something. But if it has no slope, then that means you don't even talk about a slope. It doesn't even make sense to talk about a vertical line having a slope. Okay? It is undefined or it has no slope. And let's look into this a little bit. Okay? So remember, slope is rise over run, and in this case, a vertical line has no run. Okay? There's no left or right in a vertical line. So the run has a value of 0. And remember, anything divided by 0 is undefined. So a vertical line has no slope, or it's said to be undefined. Okay? What about two parallel lines? So let's say we have line 1 and line 2, and they are parallel. We know they're parallel because we have these two chevrons here, denoting that they're parallel. Well, the slope of two parallel lines are equal. So the slope of 1 equals the slope of 2. M1 equals M2. Parallel lines have the same slope. What about two perpendicular lines? We have line 1 and then line 2 is perpendicular. We know it's perpendicular because we have that perpendicular symbol there. And what is the relationship between two perpendicular lines? Well, in two perpendicular lines, if you multiply the two slopes together, you get -1. And another way to think of it is that the slopes of perpendicular lines are opposite and reciprocal of each other. Okay, they are opposite and reciprocal of each other, or they multiply to become -1. Okay, copy that down, get caught up. We're going to cover this more in the next frame. Okay, I just copied this down onto the next frame. There's no need for you to copy this down again. But let's do some practice with slopes of perpendicular lines. Let's say, for sake of argument here, that the slope of the first line is 7/8, and that this line is perpendicular to this line. So what would be the slope of a line that's perpendicular to a line that has a slope of 7/8? Well, there's two ways to think of it. You can ask yourself, what number multiplied by 7/8 gives me -1, right? Because when I multiply the two numbers together, I should get -1. Well, if you'd like, you can pause this presentation, give yourself a chance to work that out. But for sake of this presentation, I will continue. And so if you have a slope of 7/8, what number do you have to multiply 7/8 by to get -1? Well, the answer is -8/7, right? Because 7/8 times -8/7 equals -1, right? 7 divided by 7 is 1. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So you just have a 1 and a negative sign, -1. Okay? Another way to think about it is that these are opposite and reciprocal of each other. Okay? So if you have 7/8, it's a positive number. What's the opposite of a positive number? Well, a negative number. And then also you have 7/8. What's the reciprocal of 7/8? The reciprocal of 7/8 is 8/7. So the opposite and reciprocal of 7/8 is -8/7. Okay? We'll do a few more of these. If you have a line that has a slope of -6/5 and another line that's perpendicular to that line, what is the slope of the line that's perpendicular to this line? Again, you can pause this presentation, but I'm going to continue. So if you have -6/5, the opposite and reciprocal of -6/5 is +5/6. And also -6/5 times +5/6 gives you negative 1, right, when you multiply them together. All right, next problem is what happens if you have a slope of negative 1 and another line that's perpendicular to that line. What's the slope of that second line? Well, it would be 1, right, because negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. And also they're opposite and reciprocals of each other. Okay, one last problem. You have the slope of 3/4. What is the opposite and reciprocal of 3/4? Well, again, you can pause this presentation, but I'm going to continue. The answer would be negative 4/3. Right? So, let's do some problems. Find the slope of a line that contains the points 6, 4, and 4, 0. So please write down this prompt. You can pause it, at any time if you'd like to. So I'm going to call 6, 4, point 1. It's going to be my first point on the line. So if I'm going to just call it point 1, then the 6 is my x sub 1, and my 4 is my y sub 1, right? Those would be my coordinates. 6, 4 would be x sub 1, y sub 1. 6 is x sub 1, 4 is y sub 1. And if I'm going to call this point 1, I would call 4, 0 my point 2. Therefore, 4 is my x sub 2, and 0 is my y sub 2. Okay? In other words, it's always x comma y for any point. And if I'm calling this point 2, then it's going to be x sub 2, y sub 2. And if I'm calling this point 1, then anything that refers to this point is going to be 1, and it's going to be x sub 1, y sub 1. Okay, and remember the equation for slope is y2 minus y1 is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, rise over run. So plugging in the values, you get 0 minus 4 over 4 minus 6, just substituting these values into this equation, right? And you get 0 minus 4 over 4 minus 6, which is negative 4 over negative 2, which reduces to 2. So the slope of the line that contains these 2 points is 2. Okay? And then another problem, 0, 4, and 6, 4. So I'm going to call this point, point 1. So this is going to be x sub 1, y sub 1. So my 0 is going to be x sub 1, and my 4 is going to be y sub 1. Similarly, I'm going to call this point 2. So then my 6 is going to be x sub 2, and my 4 is going to be y sub 2. And again, the formula for the slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Plugging in values, my y2 is 4, so that's where I get this 4 from. And you can pause this anytime if I'm going too fast for you. And then minus y sub 1, which is that 4. That's where you get this 4 from. And then over x2, that would be the 6, that's where I get this 6 from, minus x sub 1, which would be this 0, and that's where you get that 0 from. So, finishing off the math here, 4 minus 4 is 0 over 6. 0 divided by 6, of course, is 0. So these 2 points must have formed a horizontal line because I got a slope of 0. Okay? And the third problem, find the slope of the line that contains the points 6, 4, and 6, 0. So again, we have the formula for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Plugging in the values, we get 0 minus 4 over 6 minus 6, which is negative 4 divided by 0. And remember that any number divided by 0 is undefined. So this must have been a vertical line, correct? This must be defining a vertical line because we have an undefined slope, or it has no slope, right? What about the slope of the line that contains the points 6, 4, and 8, 2? Okay, so we have our formula for slope, and we'll substitute values in. We get 2 minus 4 over 8 minus 6. By the way, you might want to pause this presentation and convince yourself that this is in fact y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. But for the sake of the presentation, I will continue. So 2 minus 4 is negative 2. 8 minus 6 is 2. So we have that simplified to negative 2 over 2, which has a slope of negative 1. Okay? We just have two more problems now, and you need to be familiar with these problems because they will be you will see these kinds of problems on quizzes and tests and things of that nature. So problem 5, line M passes through -1, 3, and 4, 1. Line T passes through -2, -1, and 3, -3. Are the two lines parallel? So this defines one line, right? You have 2 points defining one line, and you have these other 2 points defining another line. So are the two lines parallel? So when you have problems like this, asking about two lines, then you need to find the slope of the first line and the slope of the second line, and then compare them. Okay, so let's do that. The slope of the first line is 1 minus 3 over 4 minus -1, which reduces to -2/5. The slope of line 2 is -3 minus -1 over 3 minus -2, which reduces to -2/5. So we have the slope of each line, the slope of both lines, and as we can see, the slopes equal each other, right? -2/5 equals -2/5. So yes, the two lines are parallel because they have the same slope. Okay? And then our last problem. Line N passes through 0, 2, and 6, 5. Line M passes through 2, 4, and 4, 0. Is line N perpendicular to line M? So again, we need to find the slope of each line and then compare them. So the slope of the first line is 5 minus 2 over 6 minus 0, which reduces to 3 over 6, which reduces to 1/2. The slope of the second line is 0 minus 4 over 4 minus 2, which reduces to -4 over 2, which reduces to -2. So now I have the slope of one line and the slope of my second line. And now I need to compare these two slopes. Well, I notice that they are opposite and reciprocals of each other. This is a positive number. The opposite of a positive number is a negative number. And the reciprocal of 1/2, remember reciprocal is when you take the numerator and put it in the denominator, and take the denominator and put it in the numerator, or flip the top for the bottom and the bottom for the top. So then this 1 would go on the bottom, and this 2 would go on top. So the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. So they are opposite and reciprocals of each other. Another way to look at this is when you multiply 1/2 by -2, do you get -1? And yes, of course you do. 1/2 of -2 is -1. So yes, line N is perpendicular to line M. Okay? So that's the end of the lecture. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to call me at your convenience, or get in contact with me and we could set up an appointment. It would be my pleasure to help you. Okay? Bye-bye.